I am ready, and this meeting is now being recorded.
I'm going to call us to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon. Councilors Moe.
Here.
Rodley.
Here.
Stair.
Here.
Woodrow.
Here.
Pictionary.
Here.
All right, perfect. Thank you. It looks like we have one item for our work session, which is the fiscal year 2020 comprehensive annual financial report. Everybody's favorite CAFR, and it looks like Meg for the staff report. Meg?
Good evening, counselors. I'm Meg Locko. I'm the accounting manager. We're here today to talk about and present the fiscal year 20 comprehensive annual financial report for the city of Springfield. We finally refer to it as the CAFR. The accounting entries, statements, and the notes and statistical tables are all prepared by city staff, and they're audited by an outside CPA firm. The city this year engaged Grove, Mueller, and Swank to audit the financial statements, and Ryan Pascarella is the partner in charge of our audit, and he's here to share his opinion on the financial statements with you, so I will turn it over to Ryan.
Well, I'm not sure if it's my opinion. It's more like my firm's opinion for it. Let's go with that instead. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. Definitely a completely different format than I am used to. I am used to driving to the city of Springfield. My firm's in Salem, and sitting around a table and talking to all of you. So this is definitely a different way of doing it, and I think we're all adjusting this year. So as Meg said, I work for Grove, Mueller, and Swank. We are a CPA firm out of Salem, and we perform the independent audit for the city. An audit is required because of the state of Oregon. The state of Oregon requires pretty much all municipal entities to receive an audit if they have any significant amount of activity in them. I believe the amount is $500,000 being expended in 1 year requires an audit. So Springfield will always receive an annual audit. The audit is done basically in 2 phases. The first phase is what we call our planning phase. It's historically done in June, July, somewhere in there. What we do is we sit down with the staff of the city, and we gain an understanding of what happened during the city during the year. That also includes looking at your city council minutes, just inquiries with people around the city, and looking at preliminary financial information. So we use that and kind of gain an understanding of what happened in the city. Did you change any of your financial processes during the year that we need to be looking at them more in-depthly, and really help plan for the year-end audit. The year-end audit is Meg and her department. They give us, 2 items really. They give us their year-end account balances, and they give us the CAFR that Meg said already, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I really hate saying that name. It's CAFR. That is such an easier way of doing it. So our firm then in October sometime spends a couple of weeks working with the city, going down through the account balances. For your debt balances, we're looking at third-party support to make sure that, yes, that debt amount is properly stated in the records. Looking at cash balances by looking at bank statements, looking at amounts that are owed to the city, and really trying to figure out if you've collected those, are you going to be able to collect those, and just a whole list of things. And really, it is about a 2-week process to go through all of your numbers. So we did that in October, and then the CAFR was actually finalized right at the end of December. The due date for the CAFR is 6 months after the end of the fiscal year, and so we made that by a few days. I know we were working pretty hard there near the end of December to get it out the door, but it was filed timely. The city also goes for an additional certification, which is called a GFOA certificate. And basically what that means is that people independent from the city, independent from us, take a look at that CAFR document and make sure that it meets generally accepted accounting principles. And that is something that the city has done historically, and it has been submitted. The city did receive their certificate for 2019, but we will find out about the 21 here, which is the audit we just finished, for at least a few months. I think this last year, with everything going on, it took quite a bit longer for them to get to it. But luckily, by the time we finished all of this, the certificate was there and ready to go. Hopefully, you were provided 2 documents related to the audit, one of them being our governance letter. It is a PDF document that is 10 pages long in total, and it just has it's on our letterhead. And then you should also have the CAFR in there. If you look at the governance letter, there's really one thing I want to talk about in there. Is there a question? Okay. So during the audit, we ended up recommending 2 audit adjustments to the city. And if you look at that governance letter, on page 3, basically that we recommended to the city, and the city did record. One of them being an adjustment to the allowance for bad debt related to the EMS billings, and the other one is related to the inventory balance in the street fund. And the 2 balances, one's about 64,000, one's about 85,000. There you go. Those 2 balances, really, when you look at the city as a whole, are not that big of numbers for the city based on the amount of assets that you're in. But part of what makes governmental, reporting and government auditing different than other types of auditing, we don't give an opinion on your financial statements. We give opinions, plural, which really means that when you have funds that have a significant amount of activity, and both the street fund and the ambulance fund in this are considered major funds, which basically means we treat that as its own audit. We audit the street fund as its own thing, and we also audit the ambulance fund as its own thing. That causes these 2 numbers to be significant for those funds as it relates to the year. Just barely significant, but they were significant based on the thresholds that we use. So it ends up that we needed to put these in there because if there are any significant adjustments made, that we need to communicate that to the city council. So that is why these 2 items are in here. That is the one, if you're going to compare this letter to last year's, that's really the one change that you would see in this year that you would not have seen in last year's. There are times also when we recommend misstatements, we recommend adjustments to the city to post, and the city decides not to record them for some reason. None of those happened this year. The things that we did ask the city to adjust, they did adjust during. And that's really the only thing in the governance letter, I think, that I really wanted to discuss with you. I was also going to walk you through a few pages in the CAFR if you want to share that document as well.
Councilor Steer, Leonard's had a couple questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I really got just one. Those discrepancies in the overall big picture, they're not big discrepancies, but they're significant. Was one of the things that your firm did just trace how the discrepancies were reached and how they can be corrected?
Well, really, a lot of time when we're finding adjustments, it's that there's formula errors or something in some of the documents that we get. We all work with a lot of Excel documents, and Meg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the EMS change was just a problem with the Excel file itself, that we do a lot of recalculation to make sure we kind of agree with, first of all, the methodology on how you came up with that allowance amount, but also that you're following that methodology in the spreadsheet when you're calculating the number. And the methodology was there. It was just an error in how it was being calculated, was not being followed in there. And then for the inventory, we look at, really the city does like a physical count or something near the end of the year. We use that as a start of our support documentation, and we compare that to the numbers that like Meg gave us for the year. And I believe that there's a difference between what the physical count was and what the amount that Meg provided. And Meg looks like she wants to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to tell you, the inventory was actually correct on the street. It was a difference in the equity accounts of how much of the equity was tied up in inventory.
Oh, there we go.
And so it was a minor difference, but part of the change in inventory shows up on the income statement. So we appreciate them double checking these things.
Great. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. And then if we could go to the CAFR, I want to show you a couple of things in there. As far as the presentation of the CAFR this year and how it relates to prior years, there were going to be some changes, some fundamental changes on some of the areas in the CAFR based on the federal rules on how this should be presented. But with the pandemic that happened and everything, all of the changes that were required got pushed at least a year. So really the format that you're seeing in this CAFR is the same format that you would have seen in prior years. And really what happens is that the Federal Regulatory Board, the GASB is what they're called, they go and from year to year, they kind of look at a specific part of the CAFR and see if there are things that need to be changed or not in there. And the big thing that's coming up is the agency funds that the city has, and really how that information is being presented. Not changing like the year-end balances, it's really just how it's being presented in the financial statement. So you'll see that next year, because that will be coming up next year. Okay. So I will go ahead and just share my screen 3 here. Okay. All right, so can you see the governance letter at this point? Is that what's on the screen?
Downtown's on the screen.
Yeah, the CAFR's up, Brian.
Okay, and for whatever reason, my little thing is on the other screen that says that that's the screen being shared. That's why I asked that question. Okay, so here's the CAFR for you. The first thing I want to do, like I said, the presentation is pretty close to what it was last year. So I'm going to go to page 11 in here. This is the transmittal letter. And I should say, this is a 226-page document. My firm created a whopping 5 pages out of this document. The city's staff created every other page in this document. And my job as the auditor is to read the information, look at the year-end numbers, make sure it agrees to what we've audited for the final numbers. So really, Meg and her staff, they did this document. I just have a lot of reading to do once they put it together. So similar to last year, similar to how this goes, on page 11 here, this is the start of the transmittal letter. And I will say that your city's transmittal letter is a very good version of a transmittal letter. It is very detailed. It really helps you understand, first of all, your city and changes that happened during the year. So it's a little bit of a read, but if you really want an understanding of what's happening with the city, this transmittal letter is a great place to start for it. And then after that, if I go to page 43, this is management's discussion and analysis. And this is what I've talked about in years past. And it really compares the current year to the prior year as far as what happened with your cash balances, what happened with specific revenue accounts, why some things are up, what's different this year. Like one of the things you're going to see in here is the Street Capital Fund issued debt, like $10 million worth of debt for street improvement projects. So that caused the Street Capital Fund to be major. and it's going to be talked about in here. So if you want a good understanding of just year-over-year comparisons of the city, this is a very good place to go and look for it. And then once you get down past this, this document, the farther you go in the document, the more detailed it's going to be. So when I get down to like page 61, and this is tiny writing, I get that. Once you get down to about page 61, this is where you're going to see your financial statements, really where they start for the year. And this page 61, basically combining all of your governmental activities, which are primarily property tax-based activities, all your business type activities, such as sewer and storm drainage, that type of activity. So you're going to see your cash, really your balance sheet split out between those two. So as you go back farther, you're going to see more detail, revenues related to that. I did want to show you, I'll just scroll for a second. So in your governmental activities, once you get past that front one, it gets broken into your individual funds. And so when I said that we give opinions on the financial statements, this is exactly what I mean. My firm gives an opinion on your general fund, an opinion on the street, police, the police local, and the street capital. Just on this one page, we're giving 4 opinions because we treat all of these as individual audits. I don't know if anybody wants to become a governmental auditor with me saying this. Isn't this just riveting what we get to do for work at this point?
It's inspiring.
It's sad. There are not near as many governmental auditing firms as there used to be. Gentlemen are retiring that used to be doing it. Quite a few that I know, and there's not people coming back behind. Nobody teaches this in school, so I guess we're a smaller breed than we used to be. But you'll see why this takes 2 weeks to really do this audit. We definitely do sampling. We don't look at 100% of the stuff, but there's so many different buckets within the city that we need to look at. It just takes time to get through all of that and make sure we're following the auditing rules that are out there for it. So the only thing left in the audit for the fiscal year 20 is we are still working on the federal compliance audit. The city, off and on, needs the federal compliance audit because you have to spend more than $750,000 of federal money in a year in order for it to apply. So depending on what's happening in the city, sometimes it applies, sometimes it doesn't apply. It definitely applies this year. And the reason that the federal compliance audit is not done is the coronavirus relief funds that the city got. So the federal government made sure to get the money out as quickly as they could. Well, I guess I'll say that. They got the money out, and cities really started getting the money back in June, July. But the rules weren't out there for how we should audit it. They just wanted to get the money out the door so that people could continue working. Those rules finally got finalized right around the end of December. So then we had to wait for the guidance on how we need to audit it to come out. All of that information is finally out. So now over the next, I guess, about month here or so, as time allows for us, we're going to work on that coronavirus relief funding to make sure that it was spent correctly based on what the federal guidelines state for it. And yes.
Corey.
Is there a deadline on having that now that they have the rules out?
The deadline, well, the regular deadline for your federal compliance audit is 9 months. So that would be March 31st. However, like with everything else, there's been an automatic 3-month extension, which puts it out into June. I do not want to have anything to do with that June deadline. I want it done now. So we'll get it done here fairly quickly, because if I wait and finish it in June, that means I'm starting your next audit at the same time. And I don't want to do that. I want to get one wrapped up and take a break for a little bit before I continue on. But yes, it is through June 30th. Okay, so that's basically what I have for my presentation. Not, like I said, not a lot of changes from the prior year, kind of based on how the audit went or anything. I will say the IT department, your finance staff, they made this audit go very smoothly. We have, we were out there for 2 weeks. When we go sit on site, we perform it's a 2-week audit that we're out there in October. We performed this whole thing virtually, which is definitely different than a lot of our audits, how they went this year. The fact that you keep a lot of your documentation electronically already was a tremendous help for the audit team. And the fact that we were able to get in and look at things on your network in a read-only format, we don't want to break anything. That was very helpful for us as well, because we could sit at our desks, socially distanced at our desks in Salem, and we could still look at pretty much everything that we've been able to look at in a hard copy, over the years. One unique way that we did this audit, and I don't know if it was Meg's idea or my audit manager, Scott's, but we ended up starting a meeting, like a go-to meeting, and it ran basically the entire day. And it was muted for the most part for all of us until we had a question. So we could just unmute and ask Meg a question, she could answer it, and then we would mute again and we continue on. Almost like we were sitting out there and I could walk over to Meg's desk and harass her. But instead, it was just unmuting instead. So it was, we did an OSCPA conference here about a week ago. And one of the topics was, how did you make remote auditing work this year for you? Because a lot of us, it was a crash course for us in how to do this. What your city allowed us to do was one of the examples that I shared, because I mean, we weren't on site, but it was about as close to being on site as you possibly could. And we were able to work through the information as effective as we have in prior years. So I appreciate Meg and the finance department and the IT department for making sure that was all set up for us and allowing us to do that. So.
Scott was a little, the lead auditor was a little hesitant about that at first, but he kind of came around pretty soon. I would just wanted to add that, Ryan, you guys, they spent more than 2 weeks with us. They came out for a week in June, well, virtually. This year, they do some preliminary work. They come out for a couple weeks in October after we've finished the trial balance, and then they continue to work on it up in Salem, asking additional questions and follow-up things, and then they review this whole document a couple times. So they spend more than a few weeks. He made it sound simple, but they spend a lot.
And the few weeks is what I call like our on-site time, because that's really when we would be in Springfield, sitting in your conference room, going through the documentation. So in this, I mean, we had already had the audit scheduled, quite a long time ago. So the October 2 weeks was what we had set aside. So, I mean, there was a group of 4 of us working on the audit, and we had blocked out those 2 weeks. So whether we were sitting in our houses or sitting at our firm, we were working on in that 2 week time period. And that's when we get 85 to 90% of the work done, because we're looking at all the documentation. But yes, Meg is correct. There is wrap up. Once the CAFR is ready for us to look at, we start looking at that. And that came end of November, beginning of December, somewhere in there. Is that right, Meg? Yeah, so it is spread out a little bit more. So are there questions?
Questions or comments from anybody? All right, Corey?
My comment is really just appreciation. I want to thank you and your firm for the work, and I really want a big hearty thank you to city staff. It sounds like the accounting and the admin and the IT department, I just really appreciate it. I love being first and best, so I love hearing that we were an example, so thank you for sharing that.
All right, that looks like it. Thank you guys for putting this together. I know it's a little bit of a complicated document, but I always appreciate when it comes back pretty much clean.
Yes.
That's, I think, all we had. We are adjourned until 7. AJ, are we on a new link now that we're on Zoom, or are we staying on this link?
You will be on a new link. I am still in the testing phases to make sure that you can get out and get back into an existing link, and I didn't want to chance it today. So you will be on a new link.
Perfect. All right, then I will talk to everybody at 7 o'clock. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ryan.